You are now watching the Conversations on Sinology podcast, where China's past and present meet global curiosity. Join us as we explore Chinese language, literature, history, culture, economy, and ideas that have shaped one of the world's oldest traditions and play a powerful role in shaping today's world. Presented by the Montenegrin Sinology Development Council.
Welcome to the new episode of Conversations on Sinology. Today's conversation is a special one. For the first time, we are deliberately reversing roles. Instead of leading the discussion, Jelena Stjepcevic, who has guided numerous sinology, linguistic, and intercultural projects, steps into the role of the interviewee. I am Jelena Fu, a sinologist from Serbia, taking the host seat, and I will lead you through this dialogue. Jelena, welcome. How does it feel to be interviewed?
Well, it feels very nice. Thank you, Jelena, for this wonderful idea, as it was indeed your idea. So let's see how it works.
Yeah, I'm happy to do this. Let me give you a brief introduction. Jelena Stjepcevic completed her undergraduate studies at the Faculty of Philology, University of Belgrade, earning the title of sinologist. As a recipient of the international scholarship, she continued her academic formation at Beijing Language and Culture University, immersing herself in advanced linguistic and cultural studies in the People's Republic of China. Her academic path later expanded into the field of maritime management. She completed master's and doctoral studies in maritime management at the Faculty of Maritime Studies in Kotor, with a dissertation that bridges economic transition theory with port governance systems, leading her inevitably back to China as a researcher of Chinese maritime trends. Professionally, Jelena serves as coordinator of the Office for International Cooperation in the Municipality of Kotor. In March 2025, she became a member of the World Council of Sinologists, a recognition of her sustained contribution to the field. She contributed to the national project Transcription Rules of the Montenegrin Language, Transcription Dictionary. Among her most distinguished engagement was her role as an expert consultant on the Chinese edition of the Mountain Wreath by Petar II Petrović Njegoš, a project that required deep linguistic, philological, and cultural mediation between Montenegro and China. And this is exactly the topic that I have chosen to talk to her about. So this monumental work of Petar II Petrović Njegoš, the great poet, philosopher, hereditary ruler, Bishop of Montenegro, the Mountain Wreath, which has been published more than any other poetic work in our region and translated into almost all the world's languages, is now available to Chinese readers in an exclusively prepared and specially designed edition by the publishing house Unireks. And first of all, how did this collaboration with you, Jelena, come about, and on what occasion?
Thank you for that question. Actually, this cooperation happened, in fact, as part of a broader context. In fact, we should mention first that this year marks 20 years since the establishment of diplomatic relations between China and Montenegro. So against this backdrop of long established and amicable, in the first place, relations between the People's Republic of China and Montenegro across multiple sectors, the publication of this work in Chinese, issued in a deluxe edition, as you already mentioned, constitutes important contribution to the strengthening of ties and cultural connectivity and mutual understanding between our two nations. So my collaboration with the very publishing house Unireks and Unireks Group actually commenced with this project. So we started the preparation of the Chinese edition of the Mountain Wreath by Petar II Petrović Njegoš, translated by Bai Yi Kun, and in professional terms, it stands among the most intellectually engaging projects in which I have participated. And I need to thank you for reminding me of this project, as it was, again, your idea for me to talk about it. So thanks.
Well, yes, I heard that you were involved in that project, and I thought it was really impressive knowing how complex the language and the book, the origin in original language is. And I really admired you for working on that, and I always wanted to know a bit more about it. So I'm very happy you agreed to do this. So if I am correct, this isn't the first edition of the translation to Chinese. And when was it first published? Can you tell me something about that edition, which served actually as the basis for this exclusive edition you worked on?
Yeah, in fact, I can. This masterpiece by Petar II Petrović Njegoš, The Mountain Wreath, was first published in Chinese language in 1982 by the Beijing Foreign Language Press. Since then, it has been read in China, thanks to the painstaking work of the translator and language expert Bai Yi Kun. So this translation was actually preserved today and is still preserved today as a museum specimen in the Central
Ah.
National Library in Cetinje, where it arrived as a gift from a Cetinje journalist on March 19, 1987. And on that occasion, this journalist wrote a beautiful dedication to the library, which let me read it for you for a moment.
Please,
Yeah,
please.
it's very interesting. It's because part of the work was defining and researching what was the last name of this journalist, but we could not identify it. Unfortunately, we could only do the guessing here. But I can read the dedication. I'm happy to do it.
Okay.
So here it goes. Dearest library, surely there is no better place, nor could there be, for Njegoš Mountain Wreath in the Chinese language than our Cetinje library. It is difficult for me to imagine a book that could more attractively enrich the already abundant and remarkably diverse holdings of the library of Njegoš's city. Therefore, in sending to this exalted temple of books the bishop's unsurpassable work, translated into the mother tongue of 1 billion people, I am filled with immeasurable satisfaction and exceptional joy. So this manuscript was used by the publishing house Unireks that I had the pleasure of cooperating with on the new limited edition. And in the summer of 2019, this edition in special bindings of wood and leather was published by this Podgorica-based Unireks publishing house. And in fact, they marked half a century of successful work by this edition. I can actually show it to you. It's here.
Yes, that's a really interesting path that this book took. I mean, to very, very interesting way. It came back home in a way in Chinese language.
It's beautiful. So yeah, it was very interesting. I'm happy to have been involved in this project altogether.
So I think preparing this edition must have been an extremely interesting process for you. For you, I know it would have been for me. And so, how long did it all last, and what exactly did you do?
Yeah, it would be interesting for you. Or no, it definitely would. So I'm happy to share that story. Actually, my consulting work on this project involved a lot of research at first because we tried to find out more about the translator. And we didn't have anything else but other than his name on paper. So I tried my best to find more about him, but I did not. Unfortunately, actually, the version it was translated from and more about the publishing house, some more facts about, like I mentioned, the surname of the journalist and his life from Cetinje, who brought the edition to Montenegrin National Library. And his name in the dedication that he wrote was written by hand. Of course, it's not really, we cannot really identify it correctly. And in fact, the first rendition of the Mountain Wreath into English was published in 1930 as the work of the first reader of a newly opened department for the English language and literature at the university in Belgrade, James W. Wiles. And the translated edition was published in London in 1933. So after this research that I did, after that I compared the Chinese, Montenegrin, and English versions to determine.
Ooh.
First of all, so first of all, to determine which version was it translated from, and then if all of the verses, all of its parts are there where they're supposed to be, if anything was missing, etc. And in fact, I did find some parts of the script in Chinese where it is not supposed to be, so we rearranged it as it should be before the publishing, and there was a lot of work involved. I translated also the text for the cover design, the impressum, and publisher's note, and I assisted with the layout for a bilingual edition where we talked about at the time that was planned at that time. Verified and compared the text verse by verse in two languages, and sometimes using also the English edition to compare if that's the one that was translated for. For me, as a sinologist, as you can imagine, it was particularly interesting from a linguistic and cultural perspective. And above all, this work that I did places you on a kind of a emotional roller coaster.
I can imagine that.
At one moment you are.
Njegoš's writing is full of metaphors.
Right.
I mean, it's even difficult in our own native tongue to understand sometimes what he meant.
It is.
And I cannot even imagine doing that in a foreign language.
So at one moment during this work on the Chinese version of the Mountain Wreath, you are immersed in and reminded of many linguistic gems that we forgot, but we all read this masterpiece in primary school, but we forgot most of it. We just remember the most famous parts. And on one moment, it's beautiful because you're reminded of those hidden gems, and in the next, you are confronted with sharp Montenegrin humor, witty remarks, and verbal duels between the heroes, and even that kind of dark humor that's really characteristic of the entire region. You are reminded of certain archaic phrases that remain in use to this day, and you move basically from laughter to tears in the very next instant when you encounter profoundly emotional and difficult passages that reflect the harsh reality of the time.
Yeah, I can imagine, yes, because I believe, like in my opinion, Njegoš was the artist that could say so much with so little, and then just feeling all that, and then thinking of the way how that can be said in another language, or was it said correctly when you compare it. It seems like quite a huge endeavor.
You really described it in the right way, I would say. And with some moments you really have to feel it. You really have to feel everything. Some moments quite literally bring you to tears, such as the famous lament, which is a type of folk poem recited by women after tragic events. And this leads to a very and especially interesting issue from a linguistic perspective. Then first it touches you emotionally, and then, as you said, you start thinking, how did the translator handle that type of a folk poem? Which is written in 12-syllable verse, and still managed to capture both meaning and emotion behind it. And as a result, of course, as you can imagine, I did not feel exhausted by the scope of the work because it consistently held my attention.
Absolutely. And I say we should admire that translator.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the work
of every edition of the Mountain Wreath. Absolutely.
Yes. Tell me, speaking of translation, so besides linguistic aspects, translation also erases, or at least tries to erase, cultural, geographical, and civilizational boundaries. Would you agree that the Mountain Wreath in Chinese is one of the better examples of this?
Absolutely, absolutely, and because this is epoch-defining work by Petar II Petrović Njegoš, and the publication of this work, the Mountain Wreath, is of lasting and immeasurable significance in Chinese. I mean, it represents a meaningful civilizational advancement. It unites this foundational Montenegrin poetic work text with a linguistic tradition whose script constitutes the longest continuously used writing system in the world, the Chinese writing. It has a history estimated at approximately 3,500 years. It certainly has undergone substantial historical development while preserving structural continuity. And viewed in this context, that it is now read in Mandarin, which is a standardized form of Chinese language based on Beijing dialect, and functions as one, as you know, as one of official languages of People's Republic of China, which is again widely spoken mother tongue globally, one of the most widely spoken mother tongues globally, with around 1.3 billion native speakers. And when we put it in this context, this work, this edition, clearly demonstrates that translation cannot be reduced absolutely to a purely linguistic operation. It really operates within a much broader cultural and civilizational framework, and it definitely serves as a mechanism for rapprochement between distant societies. In this instance, those of Montenegro and China.
Absolutely. Do you know, perchance, how was this book received in China? Do you have any information on that?
No, unfortunately, I do not. And I'm very, very curious about that.
So that can be our next investigation.
It is definitely worth it. It's gonna be worth it. Like working on this was worth it. I think it's gonna be a good project. So you have really have good ideas.
Yeah. Let's get back. Anyway, that's my digression. So let's go back to talking more about the translation and everything. So, when the notes from the English or some other edition that you suspect was translated from were reproduced in Chinese, do you think that created a layered interpretive filter so that maybe Montenegro is seen through another country mediation and then reframed for Chinese readers?
Well, to a certain point, I suppose that had to be true, because first of all, we have to keep in mind that it's a reflexive, heroic poem in the form of a folk drama. So in this epic, Njegoš did not rely solely on the tradition concerning the events from the beginning of the 18th century. His hearers went further back in history in their thoughts. So what we should mention too is that this text across its 2,819 verses was written in decasyllabic verse, except for that one inserted poem in 9-syllable verse and one lament that I mentioned at the beginning.
12.
12, right. Thank you. 12-syllable verse. And great translation effort is evident, reflected in the numerous notes that you mentioned, through which the translator brings this historical context closer to the Chinese reader, explaining in detail each historical figure, each important event. And the special effort was invested in clarifying geographical terms, just like in the English edition. But understanding these verses required solid knowledge of religion, philosophy, ethnography, history.
Yes.
So every edition of the Mountain Wreath is accompanied by explanation and interpretations intended to facilitate the understanding. The translator must pay attention to the influences of different cognitive patterns of different languages to improve the translation quality, to recognize them correctly, and to develop techniques to address them. So the Chinese edition mostly follows the notes from the English edition, but translates them in a way that resonates more with the Chinese reader, and inserting also, this is what I wanted to say before, inserted also some of extra explanation of his own that he thought would be needed for Chinese reader. For example, one of the examples is the explanation of certain religious terms characteristic for Christianity.
Oh, yes, yes. I would think that considering the differences between our countries, that Chinese people would need more explanations or maybe different type of explanations rather than like English reader, for example. They're more familiar with Europe, for example.
Yes. Yeah, yes. The
Yeah.
translator really paid attention to that.
Well, yeah, that's excellent. I was actually thinking as you were speaking that if our young generation now reads Njegoš, they might need the same kind of notes because of
Yeah.
like the expressions that are a bit archaic or the history that's or the context of the time that maybe even our children now, I don't know how much they are learning in school about it. And I was just imagining my daughter reading. I'm like, okay, yeah, she would have need all those notes now.
Absolutely, they are learning, and also today, absolutely, they are learning. But we need notes as well. Like you can imagine this generation. That's true.
Yeah. Did you encounter a moment where literal accuracy had to be put aside in order to preserve emotional resonance?
Emotional. Well, that absolutely had to be done too, because two parallel compositional modes are present in this work. Because I just remembered it when you mentioned if a younger generation needed notes to understand it. There is the epic chronicle mode, evident in the narration of contemporary and historical events, and there is also a reflective lyrical mode, which permeates the text. And in my opinion, this is the one which is most difficult for translation. So, due to all the aforementioned differences between Chinese script and the alphabetic one, combined with incompatible syllabic systems and rhyme, which is commonly used in traditional poetry, it is difficult to reproduce all the elements of the original form. So the translation was often adapted to the Chinese linguistic environment in a way which is culturally close to the Chinese reader, which is reflected in the choice of terms deeply rooted in Chinese culture, which is interesting. For example, there is a part in the, I think that you remember, there is a part in the Mountain Wreath where the character of an old lady accused of witchcraft is being introduced. And in the original version, and in English translation as well, the term an old woman was used for this character, while the Chinese version uses new, meaning in contemporary Chinese it means the witch. So it's not an old lady in Chinese. So the translator is choosing to describe the character as this character in the text as not just any old lady, but instead as what she really is and what she admits to be in the text, specifically a female practitioner of magic. So the word is
Very interesting.
it's interesting because the word is it's interesting for you and me and all of us sinologists to look at this term. It's composed of nu, meaning woman or female, as you know, and wo, meaning the shaman or spirit medium. Literally, it could be understood as a female shaman, but in modern Chinese usage, it does correspond to the Western concept of a witch. And it is important to make a distinction here from the core character, Wu, historically referred to an ancient shaman or ritual specialist. Its roots lie in early religious practice and were not originally associated with evil. Of course not. The character Wu is very ancient. As you know, it dates back to oracle bone script from the Shang dynasty over 3,000 years ago. And it is interesting to stop for a moment and just for me, it was interesting to stop for a moment and comment on it here because, yeah, he used the term which other than the old lady, and then he used the one that has the ancient character in it, and I just wanted to comment on it a little bit. It was just one
Yeah, well, he even used even the closer expression, like to show who the lady was.
Yes.
I mean, even more accurate, more, it's very interesting.
Yes. She really described her for what she was and for what she admitted to the hearers in the text.
Well, that just shows us that the translator had a really deep understanding of the book.
There were quite a few additional notes there, but where he was explaining that interrogation of this old woman that were not in the English edition.
Huh. Okay. Okay, that's cool. Okay, and tell me, I remember, I think that this book was at the Belgrade Fair. I'm
Yeah.
not sure in which year, and it was really like considered to be the most attractive book. Do you think it's only because it's the translation to Chinese, or it's also because of the aesthetic reasons? The book is really beautiful. I mean, the cover and everything. So what do you think? Is aesthetic prestige also part of cultural diplomacy?
It absolutely is. Thank you for putting it that way. It's for both reasons. It was attractive for the very translation to Chinese language, and also it's a very beautiful book, the one that I just showed you. And just to this part of cultural diplomacy, the aesthetic part is very important. I will just give the simplest example. The Chinese side, as you know, deeply cares about the aesthetic, especially when it comes to interpreting their heritage and culture. Every gift, then you and me
Yes.
surely had many opportunities to get from the different
Mhm.
officials and friends from China, came in a very beautiful package in colors and patterns that reflect the auspiciousness at the first place, and then the richness of the Chinese culture. Everything has a
Yes.
meaning.
Yeah, it's like I always keep my package, like
Right.
the gift wrap. Basically, the package is as beautiful as the gift.
Yes, yes. Everything has a meaning. So it was only natural that this luxurious limited edition of the Mountain Wreath is prepared in a beautiful leather and wood binding, reflecting the magnitude of this literary achievement in the first place, and also completely in line with the Chinese aesthetics. So speaking of that and of cultural diplomacy, it's interesting to mention that on the occasion of the Spring Festival, at the beginning of the new year of the tiger in 2022, the public institution Cultural Center Nikola Djurkovic in Kotor organized a series of cultural events under the name China Days in Kotor. It was actually done with this with the Sinology Development Council of Montenegro, and we actually it was from February 3rd to February 15th, 2022. And I'm going to tell you what we prepared on that occasion. As you know, Petar II Petrović Njegoš distills complex reflections into verses that we all heard about. They resemble traditional wisdom literature, shapes them as maxims, aphoristic statements, and sententious formulations, and he employs forceful poetic lines that engage with themes of liberty, ethical responsibility, honor, and they're in collective memory. So,
Absolutely.
numerous passages from the Mountain Wreath have entered cultural memory and continue to be quoted to this day. So, having this in mind, during the China Days in Qatar, we prepared bilingual bookmarks of the most famous verses from the Mountain Wreath as a gift to the visitors, among which were our Chinese guests and officials. So they were prepared in both Chinese characters and pinyin, and the verses were extracted from this Chinese edition that we are speaking of, with translation, and it was just beautiful. It's a rarity. Altogether.
Absolutely. I'm sure the people love that.
They did. Actually, we didn't prepare that many of them, and we just gave them all away. So people were really interested in them, and so out of these reasons, altogether, this represents one of the most fascinating projects that I had the opportunity to work on.
And we are slowly bringing this episode to a close. And I want to express that I really enjoyed listening about this project. I've been really curious about it, and thank you for sharing with everyone. And what remains, I think, with us is more than a discussion about translation. So what we have explored today is actually a journey from Petar II Petrović Njegoš and his Mountain Wreath to contemporary China. The Chinese edition of the Mountain Wreath besides being a publishing event, is a layered act of cultural mediation as well. And through the careful work of scholars and consultants, a 19th century Montenegrin epic enters a dialogue basically with the 21st century Chinese readership. So today's conversation that we had with Jelena also reminds us that sinology is not confined to archives or classrooms. It lives in translation projects, municipal partnerships, maritime research, publishing strategies. So Jelena, thank you again for allowing us to reverse these roles today. And I'm really sorry about my camera, like overheating.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, because sometimes the most revealing conversations actually happen when the interviewer becomes the interviewee.
Thank you, Jelena, for putting me in this role, and again for reminding me of this project. I got yet another opportunity to speak about it, but we just scratched the surface. I'm sure there is more to discover about the very translation for all those language lovers. So thanks.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, I would like to thank you for joining us for this episode of Conversations on Sinology.
Thank you, Jelena. Goodbye.
Bye.